Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. It's that time of year again where we break out the spooky stuff. Horror games are probably my favourite, but they don't have to be scary, just have that cool spooky aesthetic with all things strange, spooky and macabre. With that in mind, I've called in a few favours from some content creating friends of mine to give you even more games that are great to break out on Halloween. So how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button and we take a look at some games. Here is Pumpkin Jack, available for current consoles and being shown on my Steam Deck. The story goes that a peaceful land has been ruined by monsters after the devil himself got bored and couldn't stand the fact that it was so nice and peaceful. So a wizard brings Jack back to life. He was a bit of a dick before snuffing it, so the wizard chose him so he can stop the evil as a way of redeeming himself. So Jack, now called Pumpkin Jack, sets out to stop evil minions of the devil. The game is a 3D action platform variety where you'll be exploring the corrupted land, bashing enemies in the face and doing some jumping around. It's a fairly linear game that's split into levels which require you to follow a pretty set path, navigating the obstacles in the way. Jack can run, jump, double jump and attack. Enemies come in a few spooky varieties like skeletons, bats, rats, ghosts and various other demons. They aren't anything too revolutionary, but they fit the style of the game well and are genuinely fun to fight. The combat here is pretty simple, there's just a single attack button, but you do get a few weapons. Each level ends in a boss fight, and when you beat them, you tend to get a new weapon. What's nice is that they aren't always better in every situation. For example, you start with a regular shovel, and that's your all-round weapon. It's got a shortish range and decent power. Then you get a spear-like weapon, which has a much longer range, but is slower to attack. And then you get some swords which let you float and move faster, but they're not very powerful. This means you might want to swap around between your weapons as you play, though mostly I found I did just stick with the same one. You do also have a crow friend that you can use to attack enemies from a distance. This is pretty weak, but a good way to stun bad guys as you're approaching. You can also use the crow to interact with certain things in the environment, like pressing switches or smashing weak walls. The boss fights themselves are pretty cool. You'll probably lose a few lives when you find out the pattern. Thankfully, you do have unlimited lives. The levels themselves are pretty large and filled with checkpoints. As mentioned, there tends to be just a single path to follow, but you will need to explore it if you want to find all the hidden items and gifts, which give you certain unlockables like costumes. It's fun to find them, and you can go back to levels you've beaten if you do miss anything. There's plenty of platforming to be done as well, and the levels have a lot of verticality to them, often seeing you high up on precarious ledges and narrow platforms to get around. Thankfully, the controls are decent, and I didn't find that I fell off things too often. The only times I got annoyed really were on some of the jumping sections, as it's not as precise as it could be, and you often have to change direction in mid-air, which is never fun. The levels also do a good job of mixing things up with the on-rail sections, and there's bits like minecarts or horses, which are pretty much just obstacle courses. And there are sections where you take your pumpkin head off and have to solve simple puzzles in order to open up new areas of the level. It's a good way to mix things up. Graphically, I actually really love how this looks. It's exactly my kind of style. You can tell it's heavily inspired by Tim Burton, The Nightmare Before Christmas and the medieval games, and I really love the world that you're in. They've also chosen to use a lot of colour, which really works in its favour, making it all look so appealing. Couple that with some really good music that fits in so well, and this is a game that I really had a hard time putting down. It's also a pretty short game and can be beaten in about 5 or 6 hours, which actually I think is perfect for a game like this. It does have a few rough edges, but overall it's a highly enjoyable game that I'd really recommend playing if you haven't already. Monster Bash is an old DOS game that I used to play all the time at my friend Tom's house, and I still unironically love it to this day. You won't believe it, but all the neighbourhood pets have been kidnapped by the evil Count Chuck. This includes Johnny Dash's dog Tex, so you play as Johnny as you set out to get all the pets back. Oh, and also Count Chuck lives in the underworld and has unleashed all sorts of monsters about the place. But that's alright, you have a catapult, or slingshots as some people might call them, so you can go and deal with all of that nonsense. You have a whopping 28 levels to play through here, and your objective is to find and rescue all the caged animals in each level, and then find the exit to get to the next one. Johnny can run, jump, crawl, climb and fire rocks from his catapult to do this. You are never told how many pets are in each level, however when you get to the last one you will be told that there's no more left to find, which is always appreciated, though it would have been nice to have a rough idea of how many there are. The levels themselves are actually quite large, and as with a lot of games from this era, it can be tricky to get around, being very maze-like. You'll need to climb trees, explore caves and more on a single level at times, but getting around is fine. Enemies come in a few classic horror varieties. You've got zombies, witches, werewolves, skeletons and so on. The game is actually split into 3 chapters and each one has its own enemies and themes. You start in a graveyard setting and each chapter basically takes you further and further into the depths to find the animals. Your slingshot is generally pretty handy here. You can shoot ahead or at an upwards angle, which comes in handy for smashing the locks off of the animal cages, which is how you rescue them, as well as hitting the enemies above you. You can find new ammo types too. You've got a standard rock with unlimited shots, then there's a 3-way attack, a homing missile, and a large, powerful rock that kills most enemies in 1 or 2 hits. The special weapons do have limited ammo though, so be careful. You will need to do a lot of platforming here, and this is a game where you need to explore everywhere. I would have loved a map or indicators for animals, but you don't get any of that. There's a lot of climbing up and down, and it can be easy to miss an animal. One thing I do like is that you don't take full damage. You will get stunned if you fall too far, but not lose any health, which comes in very handy, as the enemies are pretty tough and you need all the health you can get. There are pickups and things in the levels that will replenish it, as well as items for points. Getting a certain number of points will also get you an extra life. Lives are not unlimited here, but as it's a PC game you can save as you play, and I do recommend doing this. It all looks pretty good, it's from 1993 and it's classic Apogee. In fact, that's how I have it. It's part of the Apogee collection, which I highly recommend on Steam. I love the designs on things, and again it's that classic kid-friendly horror which is somehow still appealing. Though surprisingly there's a fair bit of blood and guts here as well. I feel like this could be a tricky one for some people to get into if you don't have nostalgia for it, as it is quite basic, but I really think it's a fun game and worth a look. I also recently found out there's an HD remaster on Good Old Games. I haven't seen this, so don't know if it's any better, but will definitely be investigating. And for now, that's enough waffle for me. Over to Leathco from the Afterglow Retro Gaming Memories podcast for some gruesome gaming.
Leathco from Afterglow here, and we are entering the Halloween season, easily one of my favorite seasons, and there is one game that always stands out to me whenever Halloween comes near, and that game is Splatterhouse. The first time I had seen this game was the arcade version in a little pizzeria called Piper's Pizza in Oakland City, Indiana. I don't even know if that place still exists. The arcade machine was like not the original Splatterhouse machine, though. I remember it was a very plain machine, painted red, and for the marquee, it was just a red background with the word Splatterhouse in black lettering. But, oh man, whenever I saw this game and saw this Jason Voorhees looking dude just completely slaughtering a bunch of monsters, I knew I had to check it out. Unfortunately, my parents were highly Christian, and they're like, absolutely not. So years later, I finally got to play this game through the magic of emulation. I had built a MAME arcade machine, and whenever I was going through a ROM set, this game came up, and all those memories of seeing the arcade machine came flashing back to me. So I ended up playing this game, and it's kind of difficult, but you kind of learn your way and managed to beat it. Just was absolutely stunned. Like, for a game of its time to have this much violence and gore, it was really impressive and kind of shocking in a way. But I eventually bought my own copy of Splatterhouse whenever I started collecting in the early 2000s. I grabbed a TurboGrafx 16 and a copy of Splatterhouse, and of course, played through it again. There's some minor differences from the arcade version, not as many as what you might think. Like, the mask is red instead of white, and there's some religious iconography that's kind of been changed a little bit. But other than that, it's mostly the same game. So to explain the game, for some reason, you and your girlfriend are out in the middle of a storm. There's lightning going about everywhere, and you see this mansion that you and her rush into. Apparently, you two are attacked, she's taken, Your character, I believe, canonically is killed, but then this mask starts floating around and attaches to your face and brings you back. And the game has you starting out exploring the mansion, all sorts of monsters coming at you. There's a purple fog coming in from behind, so you have to keep going, because if this fog touches you, you die. You do have hearts for your life meter, but this isn't your standard Valentine's Day heart. It is actually a human beating heart, which is a pretty cool touch. All kinds of weapons in the game. There's knives, there's spears. In one level in particular, there's a shotgun, which that's kind of necessary for the boss. But it was so much fun to make your way through the mansion. There's a few branching pathways, not a lot, and all paths more or less into the same boss. The bosses in this game are so much fun too. Like the first one are more or less these giant leeches that try to latch onto you. The second one, I believe, is this room that's haunted with a poltergeist, so all the objects in the room start to attack you. There's Biggie Man, which is this giant dude. He kind of resembles Jason from the second Friday the 13th movie, where he's got a bag over his head instead of wearing a mask. But instead of arms, he has chainsaws, and he will completely decimate you if you don't go in there with the rifle. You do explore the grounds a little bit before going back in the mansion, and then you finally do end up finding your girlfriend. And spoiler alert here, you might want to fast forward a little bit if you don't want the game spoiled for you. But your girlfriend ends up transforming into a monster, and you have to kill her, and then the game's still not over. You continue deeper into the mansion, into the bowels and catacombs of it, eventually finding out what's powering everything in it, and attempting to destroy it, and then escaping. The escape is so cool because the entire forest area is on fire, and you get one final boss before the end of the game. There are 2 sequels of this game that came out for the Sega Genesis, and then another reboot for the game that came out for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. If you'd like to experience this game today for Halloween, your options are, of course, emulating it like I originally did. The TurboGrafx version is available on the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, or if you can come across the Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 version, it has the original game as well as the 2 sequels as an unlockable. So, happy Halloween. Thanks again to the Reviews Brothers for inviting me back on, and I hope to catch you all next time.
Thanks for that, Leathco, and be sure to check out his stuff. Links in the description below. Dying Light, shown here on the PS4, is a really cool open-world zombie game where you play as a generic man type infected with whatever the hell is causing people to turn into zombies. Turns out though, loads of people are infected, and there's actually a drug that suppresses the zombiness and is actually lets you stay human. Thankfully it's not zombie. As you can probably guess, this means people are desperate to get hold of the drug, and it can be pretty hard to come by. You're actually part of a team sent in to infiltrate some of the evil gits that are on the quarantine zone, as the plague hasn't quite affected the whole world. But sadly, your plans get scuppered when you're bitten. You end up making friends with various people and factions, and then you spend the game completing tasks for them, choosing your alliances, and so on. The game is made by the team that brought us the fun Dead Island games, and it really shows here, and I'd go as far as to say this is a spiritual sequel of sorts. Sue me. It shares a lot of the same gameplay mechanics in how you get missions and the combat, which is very melee focused. You explore a pretty large city and its surroundings, and getting around is a ton of fun as the game has a focus on parkour. Your character is pretty fit, nimble bloke. You can run and jump and climb just about anything you see, and you'll need to do this as even the most basic shambling zombies can really be quite tough to fight. And I actually found that I didn't go all combat crazy here like I normally do in zombie games. All weapons break, and while they can be repaired a few times, eventually you will need to get rid of them all. Also, a lowly zombie can take a hell of a beating to put down. You get pipes, knives, baseball bats, wrenches and so on to smash enemies in the face with, but what's cool is that you can craft some very funky weaponry as well, and these are where the more powerful ones are found. You can give weapons add-ons that give them properties like fire, electricity or poison, as well as upping the damage and making them use less of your stamina. What I do like here is that the combat stamina isn't the same as your free running stamina, so even if you run out of combat stamina, and you will, you can still run away with no problems. Leveling up is done pretty cool here as well. You get experience passively, just by attacking and exploring. You don't have to kill enemies to get XP, although you will get more if you do, but every hit will give you a small amount. Likewise, just by running, jumping and climbing, you build up your parkour XP, letting you unlock new moves and abilities. It forces you to practice, and you'll need to because it is tough. There is more of a focus on survival here, and you will meet other humans, who are also pretty damn hard to fight, but smashing their heads in with a flaming baseball bat is always fun. There's a few zombie types, and these are the ones you probably expect. You get the shambly ones, running ones, fat ones that explode, tough guy ones that take a hell of a beating, ones that spit at you and so on. Nothing new, but it's a nice variety. There is also a day to night cycle here, and nighttime can be a real problem. All the enemies here are much tougher, and there's a certain new zombie type that is only out at night, and they are super fast, tough and alert. They do not mess around. If they spot you, you want to run for your life and don't even bother trying to fight them. What's cool though is that all XP is doubled at night, but it needs to be cashed in, which isn't what happens during the day. So provided you do survive and can make it to a safe house, you'll really boost your stats. The missions I've done so far aren't really much more than fetch quests or killing people, but the story is well done and pretty intriguing, and the fact that getting around the world is just so much fun means that I don't really care about what I'm doing, as I'm having a fun time doing it. The combat is tough, but kind of deliberately, and chopping enemies to bits is really satisfying, and I'm sure as I level up it'll get easier. It all looks very good, but not the best game I've seen. Some of the character models are a bit dodgy, and the voice acting is pretty terrible. Not Dead Island terrible, but still bad. It's got a very tense atmosphere though, and you really feel a sense of dread when you're trapped in areas with loads of zombies and only a couple of weapons to try and defend yourself with. There is more to the game that I don't have time to go over here, but all you really need to know is that this is an excellent survival horror game that's unique and damn fun, and I highly recommend it. There is also a sequel that I will be getting once I've finished this. And now I'll take another break, as Ultraflamz 64 tells us about a game that is perfect for Halloween.
Kid Dracula, known as Akuma Jo Special Boku Dracula-kun, is a very unique entry in the Castlevania franchise due to how radically different it is from the other games in the series. Now, similar to other games such as Splatterhouse, Wanpaku Graffiti, and Parodius, Kid Dracula is a chibi parody and spin-off of Castlevania that was released exclusively in Japan on the Nintendo Famicom back in 1990, with a Game Boy version releasing worldwide in 1993 that pulls an Evil Dead 2 by being both a sequel and a remake. But today, I'll only be talking about the original Famicom version. So in the game you take control of none other than Kid Dracula, who is either a younger version of series villain Dracula or possibly his son Alucard, or maybe an entirely different character? Look, this game's place in the Castlevania timeline makes no sense at all, since it takes place like 10,000 years in the future despite not looking anything like the future. You know what, the game obviously isn't canon and it's not meant to be taken seriously, so let's just move on because it doesn't matter to the game's quality. Anyways, the game follows Kid Dracula, who is awakened from his 10,000-year slumber to take on a challenge from a rival demon named Galamoth for the title and throne of the self-proclaimed Demon King. Now, the game itself is quite different from Castlevania, since it plays more like Mega Man because Kid Dracula here shoots fireballs at enemies rather than using a whip. Your basic fireball attacks allow you to throw 3 at a time, similar to Mega Man. And just like the Mega Man sequels, you can charge up your attack by holding B to throw a giant fireball, which allows for enemies who take more than one hit to die faster, as well as dropping a coin that you can use in 4 minigames after completing each level that I'll eventually get into later. Dracula can also gain new abilities after defeating bosses, which can be pretty useful in some levels, such as being able to turn into a bat for a limited amount of time, or having your fireball scatter, which can be very helpful at times. Now, unlike Mega Man, Kid Dracula can shoot in 4 different directions, which can be very helpful for killing certain enemies in the game. Now, level 1 does take place in a castle, similar to a lot of other Castlevania games, And you of course platform across the castle in various locations that feel very familiar and at home in classic Castlevania, while fighting cutesy versions of monsters and the kind of enemies that you'd find in classic Castlevania. Also, there's this boss with a very questionable symbol on his head in the Japanese version. Now, that's basically the only part of the game that sort of feels like a Castlevania game, because afterwards you'll be platforming levels that take place in the sky with roller coasters, snowy and icy areas with annoying fucking spikes that can kill you in one fucking hit, a bunch of other levels that take place in various locations, and the city where you fight UFOs and Spider-Man for some reason. Man, what does this game think it is? Revenge of Shinobi? Also, why wasn't this version of Spider-Man in any of the Spider-Verse movies? Ultimately, you fall onto a subway train where you find Jason Voorhees himself and his many clones. Now, much like Konami's other games on the NES, Kid Dracula has an amazing soundtrack that for some reason doesn't get much love when compared to most of Konami's other stuff on the NES. I mean, it's so catchy and memorable that I actually enjoyed listening to the soundtrack while I was writing the script to this very review. Now, when it comes to negatives about the game, all I can really say is that I do feel that the game can feel a little difficult at times, even despite gaining more health from all these hearts that can be found in each level. And personally, I am not a fan of getting hit and flying a million miles back. But this is Castlevania after all, so that's to be expected. I'm also not a fan of the amount of pits there are in the game, or how Draki basically has to jump directly from the edge in order to make it across to another platform. Finally, my only other complaint is that I really hate how the bat controls, because I swear it feels like you're drifting either up and down when you're controlling the bat, and what makes it kinda worse is that if you dare get hit or touch anything, you turn back to normal, which could potentially get you killed depending on the situation you're in. Oh yeah, in case you were wondering about the minigames I mentioned earlier, there's 4 of them and they kind of feel randomly generated when you select them. In a lot of these minigames, your goal is to obviously get more lives in various different ways, depending on which minigame gets selected. And I do personally think that these are nice ways of gaining more lives, as well as being a nice little break from the main game. So in the end, I really enjoyed Kid Dracula and found it to be better than Splatterhouse 1 Paku Graffiti, as well as being a pretty enjoyable and interesting anomaly in the Castlevania franchise, simply because of its gameplay, great art style, good soundtrack, and because of how different it is. And honestly, I appreciate it for doing that and being different because I'm the kind of person who likes stuff like that. Now, if you want to play Kid Dracula for yourself, it is available on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection that I'd recommend you buy, since the game is fully translated into English, and because it's an overall really good collection for classic Castlevania that does frequently go on sale. But overall, Kid Dracula is a really good game that you should check out if you really like classic Konami games, as well as obscure, niche, and very underrated games that most people don't talk about. Anyways, thanks for having me on the show again.
Back to the Steam Deck now for I'm Scared. This is a spooky indie game that is deliberately confusing and disorienting, and it's actually kind of very creepy at times. It's a first-person exploration puzzle game. You wake up in a room and need to escape, and all you can do is walk around and interact with things. There's no combat here. Your goal is to basically survive whatever environment you're in, and honestly, you never really know what's coming next. One minute you're in a bedroom, then a car park, then a motel or hotel, and then some flesh-lined corridors, then a garden. Every time you do enter a new environment, you're given a vague clue as to what you need to do. Usually it's just a couple of words, then it's up to you to explore the area, finding items or opening doors to see if you can make it to the next place before the evil floating head that's chasing you gets you. And yep, that's right, you're almost always being stalked by an evil floating head. Sometimes though it's not out to kill you. Sometimes it is actively chasing you and you've got to run for your life hoping not to find a dead end. Other times you just don't see it at all, and sometimes, usually when you're used to not seeing it, you'll open a door and you'll be given a bit of a jump scare when he's right there. It's actually done really well and actually did make me jump a couple of times. But here's the thing, the game does a really good job of messing with you. You'll actually need to edit game files and configuration files at times in order to progress. The bad monster thing has the power to create and edit these as well, so you might find certain things don't work at times and you'll need to open your text editor to sort it out. Also, at times when you're caught, the game will just completely close, taking you back to your desktop. You also have to learn the name of the monster, and it goes by a few names, so you will get a few passwords that you need to be entered in order to actually play the game when trying to open it. There really is a lot to do and a lot of replay value here. I had times where the game would randomly take me to YouTube pages and things like that as well. It was strange, frustrating, and slightly unsettling, but that was the whole point. I don't really want to say too more, as this is one of those games where half the fun is finding out all the crazy stuff that happens. It's got a retro look, and it does look good. There's a short draw distance, really upping the tense feeling as you can't see what's coming up ahead of you. And really, retro-style graphics can have something really creepy about them, even compared to shiny new graphics. Something about the rough edges can make things much creepier. It plays very well and has some great sounds, and also makes you want to pee yourself. Definitely one that I do recommend if you like a scare, and it's one of those games that's really great to play with friends as well.
Good howdy everyone, this is Poppy the Masked Keaton here, and first off I want to warn you I'm not using a script for this. I'm recalling these events off of my head, and so if it gets a little rambly, my apologies. But I do appreciate Martin giving me an opportunity to talk for a couple of minutes about Echo Night Beyond. Echo Night Beyond is a survival horror game that I've played, I'm going to say a couple of years ago because I don't want to think about how long ago I actually played it. But it takes place inside an abandoned space station. You have been sent over there to find out what happened to everyone. The game has a couple of interesting mechanics. First off, visually, your player is wearing a helmet the entire time because you are in a space station. So this helmet view gives a little bit of a fisheye lens just to the edge of your vision, and maybe just a little bit of like you're looking through the glass. So everything just seems a little bit off. It's a little creepy, very atmospheric. Second off is your character's health. It is your character's heart rate. There is a heart rate monitor that is attached to your outfit. And if your character's heart rate gets too high, or if it just stays elevated for too long, your character will have a heart attack, and that is what causes the game over. In particular, I dig this because it's not guaranteed always when your character will die. Sometimes you just get right to that edge and you can survive. It adds a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Unknown certainty to the game. This game is more of a puzzle game than an action game, because there are times when you do have to run from scary ghosts, but for the most part you are walking around the station trying to find out what happened and trying to find ways to excise these ghosts that have taken up residence. And usually it's by either finding an item that they're missing or doing something to meet a requirement to send their spirit to rest. In particular, my key memory of this game is playing with my friend Tim. He's a good guy, but he's got a phobia for possessed children, ghost children. If it should be innocent and it is not, it creeps him out. Jason, Michael, Freddy, all those slashers, Art the Clown, he can handle those no problem. Give him like a Chucky doll, though? Nah, he can't handle it. And I let you know all this because we were taking turns playing at the game. You know, you'd play for about an hour, hand off the controller. And it was his turn to play. And he's wandering around this station, comes into a new room, and all of a sudden hears a child giggle. He's like, what? What was that? It sounded like a ghost kid. He's like, man, I can't stand, I don't like ghost kids. I'm like, I understand, dude. But, I just got done playing, so you're up. Now, yeah, I'm kind of loving this, watching him get so freaked out. But he's going. And he's wandering around this room, and the ghost kid just keeps giggling louder the longer he stares in this room. And eventually the kid's voice goes like, you can't find me, you can't find me. And then, remember earlier how I mentioned that you're wearing your space helmet and staring through this glass visor? Handprints start appearing on this visor. And at this point, my buddy throws my controller to the ground, stands up, and just walks away. Now, as funny as this is, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon in a well-lit room, and this absolute wanker just threw my controller on a tile floor. I can forgive him, though. It was fine. But yeah, no, that moment when these little ghostly handprints just showed up on his visor freaked him the heck out. I've never seen anyone so scared in a horror game. And so, that's why I recommend y'all try Echo Night Beyond if you're looking for some good atmospheric spooky times. Yeah. Thanks again, Martin, for letting me chat on your program. For those of you, I guess I should plug something. I occasionally am working on a little filler podcast on the Secret Levels feed, where I discuss a board game based on a video game, kind of break down the rules, and then talk about how well the board game translates to playing the video game, how well the experience match up. So if you're interested in board games and video games, pop on over to Secret Levels and keep an eye out for Boardmaster. You should listen to Secret Levels in any case. They're a good show. They'll hit you right in the nostalgia, and if you're looking to learn about a new game, they'll feed you full of information on that. It's been over 5 minutes. Didn't mean to take this long. Thank you so much, Martin, for letting me chat. Have a happy Halloween, everyone, and stay spooky.
Thank you, Keaton. Always a pleasure. Here is Daymare 1998, another indie horror game that is heavily influenced by the Resident Evil series, which, by the way, is something they're very vocal and proud of, so it's not a rip-off, it's an homage. And it's fun, but kind of ropey. There is the usual story about evil science corporations unleashing zombies here, and throughout the story you play as a few different characters. You start off as Liev, a member of the Hades Tactical Squad, a conveniently anagrammed team of tough guys who are sent in to retrieve data from a base and to take out anyone who might spot them. You explore some labs for a while which are packed with zombies and a few survivors, so you kill them all. Eventually you get what you came for, but your chopper crashes into a town and you've got to try and survive. During all this, you also take control of Samuel, a bloke that works in a nearby forest. He saw the crash and heads into town, only to find his wife is murdered and zombies have taken over. So he sets out to get revenge and also survive. There might be a few more characters, but not as far as I've got so far. The game plays like your classic survival horror. You'll be exploring areas looking for ammo, items, keys and so on, which you'll need to survive the various cryptic puzzles throughout the game. It's the classic formula and I like it. But they've really dialed up the difficulty here and have put a real emphasis on the survival aspect. Ammo is hard to come by and the enemies can take a hell of a beating. In fact, I had to put this on the easiest difficulty with all the auto-aiming features on and I still struggled. It doesn't help that the controls are a little wonky, especially with the combat. The aiming feels stiff and imprecise, but you do get used to it. And when you do, this definitely is a game that has some pretty cool moments. I really like the environments that you explore, and the game does a good job of making you feel like you can die at any moment. There are health packs and items that you can combine to make various boosters for yourself as well, which is nice. You get a few weapons. There's the usual pistols, shotguns, machine guns and so on, and they do pack a punch, but ammo is limited. So you want to do the classic thing where you take a shot or two to stun an enemy, then try and run past them, or you're going to get a face full of teeth. The puzzles here can be pretty cryptic, much like Resident Evil games that inspired it, but you do actually have the option to skip them on the easy difficulty, which I actually quite like, and it meant it wasn't stuck for hours. Graphically, the game is a very mixed bag. There's times where it looks great and very atmospheric, and other times where it looks, well, actually just quite bad. Textures can take their sweet ass time to load in, and some of the character models are just bad. What's even worse though is the writing. I've got to say, this is one of those games that thinks that by having characters swear every other word, it makes them cool and edgy. But actually the writing here is incredibly cringy, and it did at times just sound like it's fan fiction written by a 14-year-old. But still, it made me chuckle, not sure it was meant to though. Now, I did hear that this had a lot of problems and bugs when it was first released, which are mostly fixed now, and it's fine. Overall though, it is still a good survival horror game. It's definitely not a great one, but it has some good moments, and if you can handle the really tough difficulty, which is also something the game boasts about by the way, this is meant for survival horror experts, then you're probably going to have a good time, but just beware the jank.
It's terrifying. Timers beeping. Chest bursts take their toll. Alien 3, also known as Alien the Third, is a video game based on the blockbuster threequel from the Alien franchise. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen Alien 3, but I'm pretty confident in saying that the video game is super accurate to the film. You are Ripley, sole human survivor of Nostromo and UCC something or other, who once again must face off against the dreaded xenomorphs. Get ready to 2D platform your way across Fury 161 to save prisoners from hordes of these beasts. There isn't much of a storyline in the game. On the normal levels, there are a specific number of prisoners who are entombed and ready to chest burst, and you have to cut them from their tombs, which somehow stops their chests from bursting, and then make your way to the exit. Unfortunately, you have a time limit, which is the most stress-inducing part of this game. And, if you don't rescue them all, and get to the exit, they die. And you die, and you have to start all over again. After a handful of levels, you then have a boss fight called the Level Guardian, which is a weird xenomorph never before seen, or never again seen, that you will have to kill before you can exit. Run and blast your way through 15 levels to get the really lackluster ending, which is exactly the same as the movie. Spoiler alert, it isn't. It's wildly different, but I guess kids can play a terrifying game but not see someone nobly take their own life for the greater good. There are eggs that spawn facehuggers if you don't kill them first. There are aliens that come out of the ground, others that are already standing ready to attack, more that are crawling, and mostly hide in tunnels. Mostly. And, as mentioned just now, the Guardians, which are effectively hench aliens that strut around and occasionally jump, spitting acid blood in all directions. I'm not sure why the Queen wasn't the last boss. It would have made so much sense, but never mind. The music is fantastic and really adds to the sense that you are under constant time pressure. The sound effects are brilliant, except when you groan as you are injured, with bleeps and boops and blasts that will have you running around firing off pulse rifle rounds like there's no tomorrow. All ammo is limited, so use it wisely and make sure you rotate between the trusty pulse rifle as well as the flamethrower, grenades and explosive rounds. As a hardcore Alien fan, I love this game, but it is terrifying. If the jump scares don't get you when the aliens come out from the ground, or just appear as you change screens, then the last 30 seconds of the timer will have you frantically trying to find the remaining prisoners or get to the exit. The sound of those beeps really is horrific. If you are good, you can complete it in an hour, although allow yourself at least 2. This is definitely a game that I would recommend. Game over, man! Game over!
Next up is Stay Out of the House by the awesome Puppet Combo, who I should really give their own video at some point. Stay Out of the House is a really great atmospheric survival horror game. You work in a gas station, or petrol station as we say over here in Blighty, and you start the game doing your boring menial tasks, but then you meet some creepy people as you're on your night shift. Eventually you are kidnapped in a sequence that literally made me jump so much I spilled strawberry and lime flavoured water all over myself. You then have one mission and one mission alone, and that is to survive and escape. Although actually there's a few other missions because you might need to rescue other survivors or smash up the house. But anyway, either way, it's tough and very intense. Don't be fooled by the game's PS1 style graphics, this will have you on the edge of your seat the whole time. You need to creep around the dilapidated house that you've been taken into, after escaping from your cage of course, and as you explore you'll need to find items and solve puzzles in order to get out. But you do need to be quiet and careful as there are a family of psychos in the house that want you dead, and if they find that you've escaped they will hunt you down. The house is full of things you can interact with, and you'll need to explore every nook and cranny to open cupboards and drawers, finding scraps of paper that gives clue as to what's going on and who these people are, but also to find your usual assortment of items that you'll need to unlock doors, files, cabinets and further getting into the house. You also find things like screwdrivers and other tools that let you open vents, giving you more places to hide and shortcuts around the house. And speaking of hiding, you will need to do this a lot. If you're spotted, the killers will give chase and they are relentless. You need to be fast and it's good to always have an idea of where you can go if you need to hide. Certain furniture can be used as cover, like beds or things that you can go in or under, and you can hide in these places and hope the killer will go away. But be careful as they're not as stupid as you might think. They will board up doors and windows and stop you from really getting into places you've been to before. You also need to keep an eye on how much noise and light you're creating, as these will also alert the killer to you. Handily, you will find a device that can give you an idea of how much of these you're emitting, so you know when you need to slow down or shut the hell up. Likewise, you can actually use these meters to help give an idea if the killer is nearby. If there's noise but you're not making it and your device is going off, you might want to be careful. You will find other things like alarm clocks that you can use as distractions, basically making them into sort of time bombs. You set the alarm to go off in a few minutes, then go somewhere away from it, wait for it to go off, so it lures the killer to that area, then you sneak off around. You can also find weapons, so you're not totally useless, but the killer seems to be not at all human, so shooting him probably just scares them off, so be careful again. But it really is a tense game. The PS1 graphics do give it a spooky atmosphere, and Poppet Combo really know how to make a game scary. Playing this on my own in the dark was bloody terrifying, to be honest. I really like this game, and all the other Poppet Combo games I have. I highly recommend giving this a go if you're a fan of shitting yourself.
Welcome, hacker. Oh, wait, you're not the hacker. You're just a lone military asset deep in space being invaded by aliens, that's all. A continuation on the System Shock storyline, which had a bored and edgy hacker infiltrate Triatom's files for Project Citadel Station, ends with them getting very quickly arrested. Then being forced by a renegade member of the company, Diego, to hack the space station and remove all of the ethical constraints of its governing AI, Shodan. And being duped and waking up on the very space station you hacked. After narrowly escaping after stopping Shodan, the story of 2 picks up with a completely different person. A fresh recruit looking to join a military outfit of your choice and picking your specialty. After which you awaken on a ship in deep space and must help what remains of the crew try and get a warning out to Earth to warn them of the very real threat of the many, of which you are not. Featuring elements of psychological horror and the 4 great primordial fears of
darkness, heights, predators, and death,
and
isolation.
This game has it all. With it being a pre-2000s game, its controls are a little all over the place, but still familiar enough to action games of the same period. The graphics are similarly dated, but visceral and frightening nonetheless. Featuring many RPG elements and a blend of action-adventure with some survival horror baked in, it is sure to squirm into your fancy. Besides the character development, there's many different projectile weapons to choose from, and don't forget things like wrenches, shock batons, laser sabers, and crystal swords? If you find that boring, you can use your psi powers to accomplish the same with your implants and kill with your mind. But beware, the side effects might leave you seeing ghosts, or is it just a neural feedback from your implants? One of the first few games to feature audio logs of characters to build a background story, it will have you laugh, cry, and shiver as you discover the fates of the crew members and their stories. You would think that being on a ship in outer space would be boring, and yet there are many different HAB modules on the ship to keep you engaged and give a great sense of progression. Many secrets and shortcuts are only accessible to certain skill sets and may be traps, and there's only one way to tell. From the cold confines of the ship to an alien landscape, you will uncover the mysteries of the many and embark on an epic journey. Not to save only yourself, but possibly all of mankind. Well, that was me.
Grim.
And I am the sole soul behind the Lost and Gone podcast. All about lost media that never came to be. Come check it out and hear about the California Raisins and their failed NES game, or perhaps the legendary Superman film with Nicolas Cage. And if that's not enough, the story of Kenji Ino and Sunman. Either way, I'll be seeing you later.
And finally for today, how can we not take a look at Retrorealms and their new releases? We've got the double bundle, which includes Ash vs. the Evil Dead and Halloween. These are some really cool action platform games based on their respective properties. You get to choose between Ash vs. the Evil Dead or Halloween, though they are both loosely connected. In Ash vs. Evil Dead, an evil demon has entered our realm looking to take the Necronomicon to fuel his power and take over all the realms. Of course, our hero Ash has the book and isn't going to have any of that, except the demon still steals it, and so Ash has to go get it back before the demon can take over all of the realms of the living and the dead. Luckily, the demon dropped an eyeball, which gives Ash the ability to switch between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead. Gameplay is simple. You have to get to the end of the level. Then you'll fight a boss and move on. But it's all done very well and the gameplay is solid. You can run, jump, wall jump, and you have a few attacks. Ash has his trusty chainsaw arm, which makes light work of most enemies, and you can also hold down your attack button for a strong attack. For Ash, that's his shotgun blast. Sorry, boomstick. You also get a secondary weapon, like throwing knives or candles and things like that. The levels are quite large and packed with enemies, and it's a lot harder than it looks. There's a ton of deadites everywhere in regular zombie variety, or flying bug things that reverse your controls, that I hate by the way, and there's spitting demons and so on. They're all fun to kill and will explode in a torrent of blood, and yes, this game does not skimp on the red stuff. There's plenty of platforming here, and you also want to look out for the collectibles on each level, which open up secrets and dioramas for you to look at and collect, which is always nice. Dead enemies also drop money. You can use this between levels to upgrade your health, ammo count, and how long you can stay in the Dead Realm, as you can't be there permanently. The Dead Realm is cool, but much harder. When you switch to it, it changes the world that you're in to a gross undead one full of blood and guts. There's a ton more enemies in the Dead world, and what's more is they don't actually die. They'll just fall down and they will still drop money, but will always get back up. Also, the Dead world has a slightly different layout, so you will need to switch to it at times to find hidden passages or platforms that aren't there in the regular world. Being in the demon world actually is really good for earning lots of money as well, but it can cost you your life. You do get unlimited lives, but you always start from the beginning of the level and will need to collect any items you did before, which is annoying. I gotta say, I do really like the boss fights here. It's the classic thing where you've got to learn their patterns, and I really did like fighting them. Most of them are a nod to their various respective properties as well. The backgrounds in levels are also really impressive, with loads going on all over the place. And then of course there's the Halloween game. Now, the story here is that the evil demon from the other game likes Michael Myers because he's a psycho killer. So he breaks him out of his mental asylum, gives him back his trusty knife, and gives him the power to enter the Dead Realm. Then Michael basically just has to go on a bender killing everyone, because why not? Now, the gameplay here is actually basically the same as Ash vs. the Evil Dead, but the game is set in Haddonsfield rather than wherever Ash lives. You go through the hospital, the town, and so on. There's actually 4 characters that you can play as here. There's also Kelly Maxwell from Ash vs. the Evil Dead series, and of course Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis's character from the Halloween movies. Each of the characters plays quite differently, with differing speed, attacks and special attacks that you can unlock for them, and they can all be used in either of the games, which is really cool, and they even have their own story which is different depending on which game you're playing the character in, giving this loads of replay value. As you can see, the game does look fantastic with a perfect retro style and some amazing animation. The controls are spot on. Ash is faster and more nimble, and Michael is slower, more lumbering powerhouse, and it is really noticeable that the characters aren't just reskins, which I kind of thought they would be. My only real problem with the game is its pretty high price point. You have to buy these games separately, and they're not cheap, especially considering the games are pretty short, and you can probably play through them in just a couple of hours. There is a bundle with both, but it is still quite expensive for the amount of content. Still, I love the franchises, so I had to get it, and really I wasn't disappointed. This is a great retro-style horror game that is perfect for Halloween and fans of the series. So there you go, a ton of terrifying games that are perfect to play on Halloween, or if you're me, any night of the week. I love horror games. I want to say a huge thank you to Leathco, Ultraflamz, Keaton, Beltbuckle Bill and Grim for helping me out with this video. I really appreciate it and I love having you guys on. Links to all their stuff is in the comments below, so make sure you check them out. Don't forget to check out my Patreon if you haven't already, and there's even more great content on there for everyone to enjoy. On screen now you can see where you can follow me, so why not do so? And now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.